Ladies and gentlemen, friends, and all seekers of hope and faith, today I want to talk about something that challenges us all: waiting. Waiting is never easy. We live in a world that moves fast, where instant gratification has become the norm. We want our dreams fulfilled yesterday, our prayers answered now, and our problems solved immediately. But life, as we know, does not always work according to our plans. That's why trusting God's timings is so important. God's timing is perfect. Not too early, not too late, always right on schedule for the fulfillment of His plans in our lives. When we trust His timing, we learn patience, resilience, and faith. We learn that even the delays, the setbacks, and the waiting periods have a purpose. Patience is more than just waiting. It's how we wait, and waiting is never easy. In a world that moves at lightning speed, where instant solutions and immediate results are expected, waiting can feel frustrating, discouraging, and even unfair. But this is exactly where God teaches one of the most important lessons of life. Patience builds character. Every time we find ourselves in a season of waiting, it's an opportunity to grow, to strengthen our spirit, and to develop the qualities that will sustain us when the blessing finally arrives. Patience teaches us endurance. It trains us to stay steadfast even when circumstances don't make sense. It forces us to rely on faith rather than sight, and trust rather than control. Think about a diamond. A diamond starts as a piece of ordinary carbon buried deep within the earth. It only becomes the brilliant, shining gem after it is exposed to intense pressure over time. Without pressure and time, it would never reach its true potential. Waiting in God's timing works the same way. The challenges, the delays, and the uncertainties are the pressures that shape us into stronger, wiser, and more mature individuals. Patience also teaches us humility. It reminds us that we are not in control and that we need God's guidance. When we practice patience, we stop rushing life and start aligning our actions with His plan. We begin to appreciate the process, the journey, and the growth that occurs while waiting. Furthermore, patience builds trust. Each time we wait on God and see His perfect timing unfold, our faith deepens. We start to believe not just in the promise, but in the one who makes the promise. Patience turns our eyes from temporary discomfort to eternal perspective, helping us understand that every waiting season has a purpose. In essence, patience is not wasted time. It is the workshop where God molds our character, shapes our resilience, and equips us for the responsibilities and blessings that lie ahead. It transforms our frustration into faith, our anxiety into assurance, and our waiting into preparation for the extraordinary life God has planned for us. When we talk about trusting God's timing, the first and most important thing to understand is that God's timing is perfect. It may not always align with our plans, our desires, or our expectations, but that does not make it any less perfect. Often we look at our lives and wonder, why is this taking so long? Why hasn't my breakthrough come yet? Or I prayed for this months ago and I still see no change. In moments like that, it is easy to feel frustrated, impatient, or even doubtful. But God sees what we cannot see. He knows the bigger picture. He knows the path that leads to the best version of our lives. And that path is often longer, more winding, and more challenging than we expect. Think about the seasons of nature. A farmer plants seeds in the soil, waters them, and waits. If he tries to rush the growth, no matter how much effort he puts in, the seed cannot grow faster than the time it takes to sprout. It will only grow when the conditions are perfect, when the rain has come, when the soil is ready, and when the sun has warmed the earth. God's timing works the same way. He knows exactly when your blessing is ready to bloom, and rushing it or forcing it can actually ruin what is meant for you. The Bible gives us countless examples of God's perfect timing. Abraham and Sarah waited decades for the promise of Isaac, yet when the time came, the blessing was beyond their imagination. Joseph was in prison for years, yet God's plan was unfolding, and that delay positioned him to save nations. David waited for years before becoming king, and every step in the waiting period shaped him into the man God wanted him to be. Sometimes we pray and it feels like God is silent. Other times, doors we expected to open remain closed. In these moments, we must remind ourselves that God is never early, never late, and never careless. Everything unfolds in His divine schedule. Even what looks like a delay can be a perfect alignment of circumstances, timing, and people that we might not yet understand. When we internalize this truth, it changes our perspective. We start to let go of the anxiety that comes with waiting. We start to understand that a delay is not denial, a pause is not punishment, and silence does not mean absence. It simply means that God is orchestrating the right moment for our lives. It will be exactly as it should be, complete, fulfilling, and perfect in every way. Often, when we face delays, our first instinct is to feel disappointed, frustrated, or even defeated. We look at our goals, our prayers, and our dreams and wonder why things aren't happening as quickly as we expected. But what if I told you that delays are not denials? They are divine preparation. What seems like a setback is often God's way of equipping you for what lies ahead. Think of it this way: when a seed is planted, it doesn't immediately grow into a tree. It spends time underground, hidden, seemingly inactive, absorbing nutrients and developing roots that will sustain it for a lifetime. The delay is part of the process, not a failure of the process. Similarly, God uses delays to prepare us spiritually, mentally, and emotionally for the blessings He has in store. During these waiting periods, God is shaping your character, building your faith, and developing your patience. He is teaching you lessons that you will need when the doors of opportunity finally open. Delays refine us. They remove impurities, strengthen our perseverance, and help us appreciate the fullness of the blessing when it arrives. Without preparation, we might not be ready to handle what God wants to give us. Look at the story of Joseph in the Bible. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, thrown into prison unjustly, and faced years of hardship. To the world, it looked like he was being delayed or forgotten. But in reality, every setback was preparing him to become the savior of nations during a time of famine. God used the delay to prepare Joseph for a responsibility far greater than he could have imagined if everything had happened on his own timeline. Delays also teach us to rely on God instead of our own strength. When things don't happen immediately, we are forced to trust, pray, and seek His guidance rather than taking shortcuts or trying to force outcomes. This dependence on God strengthens our relationship with Him, deepens our faith, and aligns our desires with His perfect plan. In life, delays are not signs of failure. They are opportunities for preparation. They are God's gentle way of saying, I am getting you ready for what you cannot see yet. Trust me, your time is coming, and you will be ready when it does. Every delay carries a purpose, every pause has meaning, and every waiting season is an investment in the person you are becoming and the blessings that are on their way. Control. We naturally want to plan, organize, and dictate the outcomes of our lives. We make schedules, set goals, and map out our future down to the smallest detail. While planning is important, trying to control everything often leads to stress, disappointment, and frustration, especially when things don't happen according to our expectations. This is where trusting God becomes essential. Trusting over control means surrendering the need to manage every outcome and believing that God knows better than we do. It means accepting that our timing is not always aligned with His perfect plan and that His wisdom far exceeds our understanding. Consider this: when we hold tightly to control, we limit ourselves. We try to fit God's blessings into our small plans rather than allowing Him to exceed our imagination. By surrendering control, we open our lives to possibilities we could never create on our own. God's timing and plans are far bigger, better, and more perfect than anything we could engineer. Trusting over control also brings peace. There is a freedom in knowing that you do not have to carry the weight of every outcome on your shoulders. When we let God take control, we can rest, focus on our growth, and walk forward with confidence that He is orchestrating everything in our favor. It doesn't mean we sit idle. It means we actively do our part while leaving the results to God. The story of Easter is a perfect example. Esther could have tried to act on her own to save her people, but God's timing was critical. When she trusted and waited for the right moment, she became an instrument of salvation for her entire nation. If she had rushed, she could have jeopardized everything. Trusting God allowed her to act at the exact right time, and the results were far greater than anything she could have achieved through her own control. When we choose trust over control, we shift our mindset from worry to faith. We begin to see delays and challenges not as obstacles, but as part of God's perfect plan. We start to understand that timing, circumstances, and even the people around us are under His direction. And this understanding allows us to walk boldly, knowing that what is meant for us cannot be missed, and what is not meant for us will never force its way into our lives. Ultimately, choosing trust over control is about humility and wisdom. It's acknowledging that God's perspective is infinite, while ours is limited. It's choosing faith over fear, patience over impatience, and hope over anxiety. When we surrender control, we make space for God to show His power, His faithfulness, and His perfect timing in our lives. Seasons of waiting is comparison. We look at the lives of others, friends, colleagues, even strangers on social media, and we ask, why is their life moving faster than mine? Why have they achieved what I am still waiting for? Comparison is dangerous because it shifts our focus from trusting God's timing to measuring ourselves against someone else's path. Each of us has a unique journey. God does not have a one-size-fits-all plan. The challenges and triumphs in your life are tailored specifically for you. Comparing your progress to someone else's not only steals your joy, but it also undermines your faith. What works for another person may not be right for you, and their timing is not a reflection of God's blessing or lack thereof in your life. Think about the story of Moses. He spent 40 years in the wilderness before stepping into his destiny of leading Israel. Meanwhile, others may have seemed to rise quickly, achieving leadership and success. But Moses' journey was uniquely designed by God to prepare him for the enormous responsibilities ahead. Had he compared himself to others, he might have grown discouraged, rushed, or even abandoned his calling. Instead, by trusting God's timing, Moses became exactly who he needed to be when the time came. Comparison also blinds us to the blessings already present in our lives. When we focus on what someone else has, we forget to appreciate the growth lessons and small victories God has already placed along our path. Every step, even the slow ones, has value. Every season of waiting has a purpose, even if it looks different from the paths of those around us. Instead of comparing, we must focus on our own journey with God. Celebrate progress, no matter how small. Recognize the lessons in the delays, the growth in the trials, and the faith being developed within you. When you stop measuring yourself against others, you open the door to contentment, trust, and clarity in God's perfect plan for your life. Remember, God's timing for you is not only perfect, it is personalized. Just because someone else's blessing arrived earlier does not mean yours will not come. In fact, your journey is designed to prepare you for a blessing that is perfectly aligned with who you are becoming, and what God has intended for you. Trusting your unique path keeps you focused, patient, and ready for the moment when your breakthrough finally arrives. Feel idle or frustrated as if nothing is happening. But this is exactly when God invites us to step into prayer, which I like to call the waiting room of God's timing. Prayer is not just asking for what we want. It is a powerful tool that aligns our hearts, strengthens our faith, and prepares us for the blessings to come. Think about a waiting room at a doctor's office. While you wait, you are not just sitting idly. You are preparing to receive care. You are reviewing your health, thinking about your needs, and preparing for the doctor's guidance. Prayer works the same way in the spiritual waiting room. When we pray, we are not wasting time. We are preparing our hearts, minds, and spirits to receive what God has planned for us. Prayer teaches patience and trust. Each time we lift our request to God and wait for His response, we reinforce for us the belief that His timing is perfect. We acknowledge that He sees the bigger picture, that He knows the best outcome, and that He is actively working on our behalf, even when we cannot see it. Through prayer, we cultivate a mindset of surrender and faith rather than frustration and doubt. Moreover, prayer transforms our perspective while we wait. It shifts our focus from the delay itself to the presence of God in the delay. It reminds us that God is not absent just because the answer has not arrived yet. In fact, sometimes the waiting is the most productive season of all, because in the waiting room of prayer, God is refining us, teaching us, and preparing us to receive His blessings fully and wisely. Prayer also brings clarity. When we spend time in conversation with God, we start to understand His guidance and direction more clearly. He can reveal steps we should take, people we need to meet, or changes we need to make while we wait. The waiting period is not empty. It is active preparation guided by divine insight. The story of Hannah in the Bible illustrates this beautifully. She prayed earnestly for a child, pouring out her heart to God, even as years passed without an answer. Her time in the waiting room of prayer was not wasted. It strengthened her faith, deepened her relationship with God, and prepared her for the joy of motherhood when the blessing finally arrived. Ultimately, prayer transforms waiting into a season of growth, trust, and preparation. It is a sacred space where we align our desires with God's will, strengthen our patience, and prepare to step into the blessings that await us. Every minute spent in prayer brings us closer to understanding that God's timing is perfect and that He is actively working behind the scenes on our behalf. Powerful obstacles we face. Fear whispers doubts in our ears. What if it never happens? What if you are missing your chance? What if this delay means failure? These fears can paralyze us, steal our joy, and make us question God's timing. But the truth is, faith must always triumph over fear. Faith is believing in the unseen, trusting in what cannot yet be fully realized, and holding on to the promises of God even when the circumstances seem uncertain. Fear, on the other hand, focuses on what could go wrong, what has not yet happened, and what we cannot control. Faith shifts our perspective from doubt to hope, from panic to peace, and from uncertainty to trust. When we choose faith over fear, we are not ignoring reality. We are acknowledging that God's power is greater than any problem, delay, or obstacle. Faith allows us to move forward with confidence, knowing that what is meant for us will come in God's perfect timing. It reminds us that even when the path seems unclear, God is already at work behind the scenes, orchestrating events, preparing opportunities, and guiding us toward our destiny. Think of David facing Goliath. The giant was intimidating, the army was fearful, and the odds were stacked against him. But David chose faith over fear. He trusted God's power, and that trust turned what seemed like an impossible battle into a miraculous victory. Similarly, in our own lives, faith gives us the courage to wait patiently, persevere through challenges, and stand firm even when fear tries to shake us. Faith over fear also teaches us resilience. Waiting seasons can be long, uncertain, and filled with challenges that test our patience. But fear will always want to rush us, make us give up, or push us into decisions that are not aligned with God's plan. Faith steadies our hearts, reminding us that the delay is not denial and that God's timing is always perfect. Furthermore, faith strengthens our prayer life and our relationship with God. When we face fear with faith, we turn to God for guidance, reassurance, and strength rather than relying solely on our own understanding. Fear isolates us. Faith connects us to the one who holds all things in his hands. Ultimately, choosing faith over fear is a daily decision. It is a conscious commitment to trust God's timing, believe in his promises, and let go of anxiety about the unknown. Faith is not passive, it is active, courageous, and persistent. It is the lens through which we see every delay, every challenge, and every waiting period, not as a barrier, but as an opportunity for God to demonstrate his perfect timing, his unwavering love, and his unshakable faithfulness. Plans are bigger and better than ours. We often make our own plans, set our own timelines, and imagine how our life should unfold. We have dreams of promotions, relationships, financial success, or personal achievements, and we want them according to our schedule. But God's vision is infinitely larger than ours, and his timing is always designed to bring the best version of those dreams into our lives. When we focus only on our plans, we limit ourselves. We might settle for less, rush decisions, or take paths that seem convenient but are not part of God's greater purpose. But when we trust that God's plans surpass our own, we begin to see delays, obstacles, and setbacks not as failures, but as opportunities to align ourselves with his higher purpose. Sometimes what we want in the short term could actually prevent us from receiving what is perfect for our long-term destiny. The story of Joseph illustrates this beautifully. Joseph dreamed of leadership and success, but his journey took him through betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. From a human perspective, it seemed like everything was going wrong. But God's plan was far greater than Joseph's own understanding. Those hardships prepared him to save not only Egypt, but entire nations from famine. If Joseph had tried to shortcut God's process, he would have missed the fullness of the blessing and the ultimate purpose God had for his life. When we realize that God's plans surpass our plans, it changes how we view waiting. We start to see patience not as a delay, but as a preparation. We understand that every twist, turn, and pause is intentional. Every closed door, every not yet, every season of silence is part of a plan that is larger, more meaningful, and more perfect than anything we could design ourselves. Trusting in God's greater plan also frees us from disappointment. When our expectations are limited to what we can see, we often feel discouraged when things don't go our way. But when we trust God's plan, we realize that he is orchestrating outcomes that are far beyond what we could imagine, often with blessings, lessons, and connections we never anticipated. In essence, God's timing and plans are a promise that what is meant for us cannot be rushed. What is meant to be ours cannot be lost. And what is not for us cannot come too early. By surrendering our own schedules and trusting in his superior plan, we open the door to a life of abundance, purpose, and fulfillment that we could never create on our own. Trusting God's timing is that patience produces rewards. Waiting is rarely easy. It can be uncomfortable, frustrating, and even exhausting. But it is during these periods of patience that God is at work, preparing blessings and opportunities that will far exceed anything we could achieve through haste or impatience. Patience is more than passive waiting. It is active perseverance. It is the steady commitment to stay faithful, remain hopeful, and continue trusting in God even when circumstances seem to suggest otherwise. Every season of waiting, every period of silence, and every delay is an investment in the future. And just like an investment, the longer and more faithfully we wait, the greater the rewards. Think about the process of growing a fruit tree. You plant the seed, water it, protect it from harsh conditions, and patiently care for it over months and even years. You cannot rush the growth or force the fruit to appear before it is ready, but when the time comes, the tree produces fruit that is abundant, nourishing, and worth every day of careful waiting. Similarly, the blessings God has for us often require patience to fully ripen. The Bible is filled with examples of patience producing extraordinary rewards. Abraham waited decades for the promise of Isaac, and when it finally came, it was a blessing that shaped generations. Job endured unimaginable trials for years, yet his patience and faithfulness resulted in a reward that was far greater than his initial suffering. These stories remind us that delays are not denials. They are periods in which God is preparing the reward that aligns perfectly with his plan. Patience also teaches us gratitude and appreciation. When blessings come too quickly, we may take them for granted. But when we wait, we understand the value of what we receive. We cherish the reward because we experience the journey that led to it, the growth, the lessons, and the faith developed along the way. Waiting gives depth to our victories and meaning to our achievements. Moreover, patience in waiting strengthens our character and equips us to handle the responsibility of the reward. Sometimes what God has in store is so significant that without the growth and endurance gained through patience, we would not be ready to manage it wisely. Patience ensures that we are not only receiving the blessing, but that we are ready to fully embrace it, steward it well, and use it for the purpose God intended. In short, patience is not empty time. It is fertile ground for reward. Every moment spent trusting God, enduring delays, and waiting faith is a step closer to receiving the blessings that He has promised. Patience produces not only material or external rewards, but spiritual growth, strength, and peace that last far longer than any immediate gratification could provide. In God's timing is this: your season will come. No matter how long the waiting period, no matter how many setbacks or delays you face, God has a perfect season prepared specifically for you. Every waiting period, every moment of preparation, and every trial is leading you closer to the exact time when your breakthrough will arrive. It is easy to become discouraged when we see others advancing, achieving success, or receiving the blessings we desire. But God's plan is personal, unique, and perfectly timed for each of us. Just because your breakthrough hasn't arrived yet does not mean it won't. It simply means that God is preparing the right conditions, opening the right doors, and shaping you into the person who can fully embrace the blessing when the time comes. Think about Joseph. He spent years in slavery and prison, waiting in circumstances that seemed hopeless. To the world, it looked like his life had been delayed or derailed. Yet every single trial was preparing him for a season of extraordinary favor. When the time finally came, Joseph rose to a position of influence that not only transformed his life, but also saved countless others. His story reminds us that God's timing is never late. It is always precise. Your season is not determined by the speed of others or by the impatience of your heart. It is determined by God. The waiting period is essential. It is during this time that your faith is strengthened, your character is refined, and your purpose is clarified. By the time your season arrives, you will be ready to handle it with wisdom, gratitude, and the fullness of joy. Understanding that your season will come also protects you from settling for less than what God has for you. When you wait for God's perfect timing, you avoid rushing into situations, relationships, or opportunities that are not aligned with your destiny. The right season ensures that your blessings are complete, lasting, and life-transforming rather than temporary or unfulfilling. Remember, God works in seasons. Just as nature has a time for planting, growth, and harvest, your life has seasons designed by Him. Each season has its purposes, some for preparation, some for testing, and some for blessing. Your season may feel delayed, but it is coming stronger, brighter, and more beautiful than you could imagine. Faith, patience, and perseverance are the keys to standing firm while waiting. Trust that God's schedule is perfect and remind yourself daily, my time will come. I will not miss my season because it is orchestrated by the one who holds the universe in His hands. This truth provides hope, peace, and unwavering confidence, even in the midst of uncertainty. skill we must develop is the ability to recognize the signs that God places along our path. Often we are so focused on what we want or how fast we want it that we miss these subtle guidance, opportunities, and confirmations that God sends our way. These signs are His way of saying, I am working on your behalf and your time is coming. God communicates with us in many ways. Through circumstances, through people, through doors opening or closing, and sometimes through a quiet inward prompting in our hearts. Recognizing these signs requires awareness, attentiveness, and a heart attuned to God. When we learn to notice them, we gain clarity, confidence, and reassurance that we are moving in alignment with His plan. Think about the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. God didn't leave them without guidance. He provided signs every step of the way, the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. These were not just physical markers. They were reminders of His presence, His timing, and His direction. Without paying attention to these signs, they could have easily become lost, discouraged, or led astray. Similarly, in our lives, God provides signs to guide us toward the right opportunities at the right time. Recognizing God's signs also requires patience and discernment. Not every door that opens is meant for us, and not every opportunity is a green light. Sometimes a closed door is the clearest sign that God is protecting us from something that is not right for us or preparing us for something far better. Other times, an unexpected encounter, a sudden insight, or a recurring pattern may be the confirmation we need to take the next step in faith. Spiritual discernment grows through prayer, reflection, and attentiveness. The more we seek God, the more we learn to interpret His signals. It requires quieting our minds, listening to His voice, and trusting that even small, seemingly ordinary events may carry extraordinary significance in God's plan. Recognizing God's signs strengthens our faith. It reminds us that we are not alone in our waiting, that God is actively orchestrating the circumstances, and that every season has meaning. When we see His guidance, even in subtle ways, it builds our confidence to wait, to act at the right moment, and to trust that His timing is perfect. Ultimately, learning to recognize the signs is about alignment with God. It teaches us to move when He moves, to wait when He calls for patience, and to act when He opens the way. By noticing and following these divine signals, we not only honor God's timing, but also position ourselves to receive the blessings He has carefully prepared for us. Is never a mistake. Every delay, every challenge, every season of waiting is intentional. It is designed to prepare you, strengthen you, and position you for the exact blessing that is meant for you. Do not be discouraged by what hasn't happened yet. Do not compare your journey to anyone else's. Do not allow fear or impatience to steal your peace. Instead, trust the process, trust the preparation, trust that God is orchestrating every detail for your good. Remember, when you wait on God, you are never wasting time. You are growing, you are being refined, you are being prepared for a life that is greater than you can imagine. What is meant for you will come, and it will come at the perfect time, in the perfect way, and for the perfect purpose. So stand firm in faith. Be patient in the waiting. Listen for His signs. Keep praying, keep trusting, and keep believing your breakthrough, your blessing, your season, it is coming. And when it does, it will be worth every second of waiting. Today, make the decision to surrender your timeline to God. Let go of control, let go of fear, and step into the confidence that God's timing is perfect and He is always faithful. Trust His timing because His timing is perfect, and your life will never be the same again.